From slam knockouts to the rarest of submissions, the 30th year of the UFC produced some incredible finishes. There were a total of 159 knockouts and 102 submissions. However, 8 of the finishes were so extraordinary that we just can't seem to stop talking about them. In this video, we're looking at 2023's 8 greatest finishes in the UFC octagon. Number 8. McKin vs. Bonfim. Many argue that this was the knockout of the year. Well, very rarely do you see a flying knee land as cleanly as it did at UFC 283 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. 27-year-old Ismael Bonfim impressed on Dana White's Contender Series and was making his UFC debut against Terrence T-Rex McKin, who was one of the hardest punchers in the lightweight division. Bonfim tagged McKin in multiple occasions, but he really cranked up the violence in round 2. Bonfim continued to show why he belongs in the UFC. He knocked McKin's mouthpiece out with a punch, but nobody anticipated what was to come next. Bonfim leaped and landed a switch knee that drilled McKin directly in the chin. McKin was out on his feet and face-planted to the canvas. The victory was Bonfim's 13th in a row, and the finish was to many fans the knockout of the year. Number 7. Jon Jones vs. Ciryl Gane. After 3 years away, Jon Jones made his long-awaited octagon return at UFC 285, taking on former interim heavyweight title holder Ciryl "Bon" Gane for the division's vacant undisputed title. It was Jones' debut at heavyweight, and many were curious about how well he was ready for his new division. Well, it turned out that Bones was more than ready. In the first real exchange, Gane kicked Jones in the groin, causing a temporary delay before Bones shook it off. Gane had unwisely riled Jones up, and he was about to reap the consequence. As is the strategy in many of his fights, Jones landed a couple of leg kicks before attempting his first takedown against the inexperienced Gane. Bon put up little resistance, was taken down, and crawled his way towards the fence. But Jones had prepared for this scenario. He bunched up his man and wrapped his 95 inches long arms around the neck in a guillotine. At first, it was unclear why Gane had tapped so quickly, but it then became clear that the submission was in deep and he had no way out. Jones' place in UFC history was already well solidified, but this finish over Gane took it to a whole new level. It took him to number 1 on the pound-for-pound list, but that was only till Makev and Volkanovski clashed. Makev vs. Volkanovski 2. Perhaps the most defining knockout of the year, Islam Makev put an end to Alexander Volkanovski's search for a belt in a second division. A rematch of their close February meeting, this fight was to end all doubts as to who was the true pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC. To do this, Makev realized he needed to stop Volkanovski. He is strong, but this guy, to stop him, you have to switch him off, like knock him out or make him to sleep. He never give up. I want to finish him. Makev opened up with an inside leg kick while Volkanovski favored an outside leg kick. The Dagestani threw a high kick and then went for a takedown. However, Volkanovski was more than ready to grapple. He reversed positions and had Islam against the fence. At 3 minutes 6 seconds of the first round, the packed Etihad Arena burst into life when Makev landed a left kick to Volkanovski's head. Volk flopped to the mat and Makev quickly jumped on top and landed short hammer fists to end the affair. With the settling of the rivalry, Makev leaped to number 1 on the pound-for-pound list, and Volkanovski was forced to head back to his division. Poirier vs. Gaethje 2. Perhaps 2023 was the year of ending rivalries. 2 of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC clashed at UFC 291 inside the Delta Center in Salt Lake City, Utah, in what was a rematch of their 2018 bout where Poirier had won by TKO. The BMF title was on the line this time, and the winner was to get a shot at the undisputed title. The first 5 minutes suggested it was to be a fight of the year contender. The Diamond bloodied up his opponent a bit above the eyebrow, causing discomfort to Gaethje's eye. Regardless, Gaethje closed the round swinging on his opponent. In the second round, the highlight pulled out a trick he had rarely shown in the UFC. He blinded Poirier's view by putting his right fist against the Diamond's face and threw a roundhouse kick that caught Poirier just behind the gloves. Poirier fell like a sack of potatoes, and Gaethje slipped in a vicious hammer fist before onrushing Herb Dean slid in to end the fight. Gaethje was the new BMF, and rightfully so. Adesanya vs. Pereira 2. Speaking of vengeance, after 3 losses and 2 errands to the Shadow Realm by Alex Pereira, the last stylebender got his opportunity to regain his middleweight title and enact revenge against his greatest rival in the main event of UFC 287. After about 9 minutes in the fight, the 2 greatest strikers in the UFC decided to finally close the distance and throw down. Pereira landed a calf kick that buckled Izzy before following up with a brutal barrage of strikes. But Izzy was one step ahead. The last stylebender played possum, inviting Poatan to throw strikes and let his guard down. Adesanya blocked Pereira's signature left hook and threw a resounding 1-2 that almost took off Pereira's head. But the boogeyman sprung right back up. Izzy followed up with another right cross and a short left to completely put the hands of stone to sleep. The last stylebender added a hammer fist that kept Pereira sleeping for a bit longer. It took Adesanya 4 attempts in 2 different sports, but he finally conquered the nightmare that haunted his otherwise sublime combat sports career. The belt was just the cherry on top. Pereira vs. Prochazka. Having lost his middleweight belt to Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira moved up to light heavyweight, and a decision victory over Jan Blachowicz brought him against Jiří Prochazka, a former light heavyweight champion. For Poatan, it was a search for redemption after being laid out flat by his arch-rival some months back. Pereira took the early lead with a calf kick that dropped Jiří in the Madison Square Garden showdown. Prochazka answered with some grappling. However, trained by a BJJ master like Glover Teixeira, Pereira almost caught him with a standing guillotine. Jiří had some success by throwing a right cross, which was the major weapon Israel Adesanya had employed against Pereira. With Jiří coming in to land a right hook, Pereira uncorked a perfectly timed left hand that put Jiří on the ground, forcing the fighter from check to dive for a double leg takedown. Pereira responded with a flurry of elbows to the side of Jiří's head, and the referee had seen enough and jumped in to halt the fight. The Brazilian had regained the belt previously held by his mentor, Glover Teixeira. Sterling vs. O'Malley. Sugar Sean O'Malley touted himself as the next Conor McGregor. Well, he proved it by winning his belt in the same fashion that his hero had done against Jose Aldo. His opponent was Aljamain Sterling, a 3-time bantamweight champion who was a win away from cementing his place as the greatest bantamweight in UFC history. The first round was as close as they come. Both men struggled to land anything significant until Sterling closed the distance with seconds left and let loose with a flurry of punches against the fence. However, Sugar, being an expert finisher, wasn't about to leave this fight to the judges. He was clearly being patient and looking for a counterpunch. In the second round, the Funk Master made an ill-fated error by rushing the talented striker. O'Malley let the punch fly past his chin before returning with a hard right hand that sent Sterling crashing face first to the canvas. The Funk Master rolled to his back but couldn't defend himself intelligently from the barrage of ground strikes that followed. Alexa Grasso uprooted Valentina Shevchenko's long reign over the women's flyweight division in what was the best women's finish of 2023. At the start of 2023, the Bullet was the most dominant fighter in the UFC, with 7 straight title defenses under her belt. Up next was Alexa Grasso, a soft-spoken fighter from Guadalajara, Mexico, who had won 4 straight since moving to flyweight. From the moment the first bell rang, the Bullet realized that she was in for a hard fight. Grasso repeatedly tagged Shevchenko with combinations, hardly gave any ground, and made the champion work for everything. Despite the surprise, she was on her way to losing the fight by decision. But Grasso didn't come for a participation trophy. With 1 minute left in the round, Shevchenko threw a lazy spinning back kick, and Grasso pounced, jumping on Shevchenko's back and immediately attacking with a rear naked choke. But the long-reigning champ was not going to let go of her belt that easily. Some moments later, she tapped, and against all odds, Alexa Grasso was a UFC champion. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like and comment.